Hello, in this podcast we're going to be looking at photosynthesis and respiration, and our learning target is that we will understand both processes, photosynthesis and respiration. We'll start with photosynthesis, and we'll start with looking at an early experiment that was done with photosynthesis. Many people today who haven't studied it, and the brightest minds prior to 1643, thought that a plant derived its nutrients from the soil. And that's all logical because, after all, a plant's roots are in the soil, so it would be logical to think that it did. What science does is that science realizes that what's logical is not necessarily true. What makes sense is not necessarily true, so we do experiments to see what really is reality. And what Van Helmont did was he took a tree sapling, a willow sapling, that weighed 23 kilograms, and he planted it in dry soil, which he weighed at 90.9 kilograms. He waited 5 years, only watering it, and the willow grew to 77 kilograms. And when he weighed the soil, it went down a little bit, but it was basically all that weight that the willow had gained had not come from the soil, since it only went down by 1/10 of a kilogram. So Van Helmont basically he concluded that the willow did not receive nutrients from the soil. It had to receive from someplace else. So where does all the matter that's in trees and in plants, where does that come from if it doesn't come from the soil? Now here's the big picture for photosynthesis. And while I'm going over this, you might want to take a look at the diagram on photosynthesis. First thing is, where that matter comes from, we now know that it comes from water and from carbon dioxide. It comes from the air. And in the leaves, there's a pigment which you probably have heard of, chlorophyll, and it catches the light energy. And it takes that light energy to combine the water and the carbon dioxide. Those come together using enzymes, and that, as it combines it, it turns it into sugar, and then that sugar can be changed into other substances. There are some things taken from the soil, and that's what fertilizer is for. And that fertilizer primarily contains nitrogen, which is found in all proteins and all nucleic acids. So not everything comes through photosynthesis, but most of the stuff does. And only autotrophs can do that. I didn't say only plants. Practically all plants do this. Some actually don't. Not all plants are autotrophs, and there are many autotrophs that are not plants, like algae are not plants, and there are bacteria that are autotrophs and are definitely not plants. Here's the equation for photosynthesis, and you need to know both the word equation and the symbol equation. The word equation is that water and carbon dioxide and light, those will become sugar, or you may see glucose instead of sugar, and oxygen. And the symbolic equation for this is 6H2O plus 6CO2. Sometimes you'll see plus light will become, and sometimes you'll see chlorophyll or photosynthesis above the arrow. Becomes C6H12O6, which is the formula for sugar, or for glucose, in fact, plus oxygen. Where does photosynthesis occur? Well, the organ in plants in which it occurs is the leaves, and the organelle is the chloroplast, which we learned about in the last unit. Now we come to respiration, and we're talking here about cellular respiration. We're not talking about breathing. This is a cellular respiration, which is obtaining energy from nutrients. Every organism, even plants, do this. You may see something like respiration is something that's done 24/7, while photosynthesis is something that's done only by plants and only in the daytime. Respiration can be put into two categories, aerobic and anaerobic. And basically, aerobic is when you use lots of energy. Anaerobic, and also uses oxygen. It doesn't use lots of energy, it releases lots of energy. Anaerobic uses no oxygen, and it produces less energy. So like organisms that can do both will use anaerobic when there's not a lot of oxygen available. Like if you're working out really, really hard, like for example, or one way you can see it is like if you take your textbook and just hold your arm out all the way out like this, and put the book. So if you take a book and you hold it out like this, and just do it right now, and just keep holding it out like this, and if you keep doing that, eventually it's literally going to become painful for you to hold it out there, and at that point your muscles are doing anaerobic respiration because they've run out of oxygen. And there are plenty of organisms that only do anaerobic respiration, and we take advantage of this sometimes, like in fermentation is another way of calling a lot of anaerobic respirations, most of them. And one kind makes alcohol, and we use that type of fermentation in bread, to make breads, and also to make almost all alcohols. In order to understand respiration, we need to know the ATP-ADP cycle. ATP stands for adenine triphosphate, ADP stands for adenine diphosphate. ADP is a low energy molecule, ATP is high energy. Basically, the di means there are 2 phosphates, and the tri means there are 3 phosphates. And if you look at the diagram here, that's basically the cycle. Respiration will take the ADP, add a phosphate to it, and make ATP. So you go from low energy to high energy. And that ATP is then used for work. It's used to do things like any type of movement you make with your muscles, anything, all active transport, all uses ATP. And the process of changing of all chemical reactions that require energy uses ATP. Could think of it as the energy currency of the cell. Now here's aerobic respiration, and here, just like in photosynthesis, you have to know the word equation, you have to know the symbolic equation. And here's here's the word equation. Sugar plus oxygen plus 36 ADP will become carbon dioxide and water and 36 ATP. And in the symbolic equation, the symbol for sugar or glucose, in the word equation, sometimes like in photosynthesis, sometimes you'll see glucose instead of sugar. C6H12O6 plus 6O2 plus 36 ADP yields or becomes 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus 36 ATP. And the organelle in which aerobic respiration occurs in is the mitochondria, which we learned about in the cell unit. Anaerobic respiration is different in that it makes a lot less energy. If you look in both of these, you see they make only 2 ATP. And there are many kinds, of which 2 is what I'm going to hold you responsible for. There's lactic acid fermentation. This our muscles do, and also bacteria that make yogurt do it, as well as a lot of sour things like sauerkraut. Same type of thing. It's this type of lactic acid fermentation. And here, take the same sugar and turns it into lactic acid, and you only get, instead of getting 36 ATP, you only get 2 ATP. So aerobic respiration makes 18 times the energy from the same glucose molecule as anaerobic. And then you have alcohol fermentation, where you end up with glucose plus 2 ADP will give you alcohol plus carbon dioxide plus 2 ATP. And yeast are the primary organisms that do this. And for this, a lot of our drinks, beer, alcohol, beer, wine, just about everything is from alcohol fermentation. Also carbon dioxide, that can be used to make sodas, it can be used to make bread rise. And the alcohol and lactic acid, those are basically waste products. Just like for us, carbon dioxide is a waste product. So basically when someone is drinking, when we make beer, we make wine, basically what we're doing is we're making a drink out of yeast piss. Now we come to the concluding questions. Number 1, what is the formula for photosynthesis? You can put down either the word equation or the symbol equation. Your choice. Number 2, in what organelle does photosynthesis occur? Number 3, what is the formula for aerobic respiration? Word equation, symbolic equation, up to you. Number 4, in what organelle does aerobic respiration occur? And number 5, how many times more energy does aerobic respiration give compared to anaerobic respiration? And that about does it for this vodcast, and I'll see you in class tomorrow.